Okay, there we go. Okay, there we go. Hopefully the audio is okay. Hopefully everything is working now. All right. The Ukraine-Russia crisis. So we're gonna go through this. I'm gonna give my hot take. We're gonna talk about who I think is wrong, who I think is right, what the geopolitical things are. We're just gonna go through this whole thing. So it's going to be kind of my typical take. So I like to think my takes are a combination of me posting hastily, poorly thought out videos or comments when I'm in a manic phase, and um, when I'm in a manic phase and then regretting it immediately and taking it down. So that's kind of part one. And then part two of the thing is me generally giving the kind of more reasonable, um, balanced take, I guess you could say. Definitely, I will have a opinion on this one, but we'll just kind of go through it. So, let me know if the audio is working good now. Let's go into today's topic. So, the Ukraine Russia war. Let me see where the battle lines are as of today. We're probably going to watch this. It's probably going to be some truly epic levels of cringe, but it is what it is. So I would say my whole kind of issue with this is my issue with a lot of things where I don't like to use the term hypocrisy because it's overused, and that's not exactly what I I mean when I talk about it. My issue is more when you state something as being an absolute moral principle, but then you make just random exceptions about it that you don't really justify. So I'm okay, for instance, personally going, look, I think there are limits to free speech. I only really support it in the context of a tactical thing while my side isn't in power. But if I was in power or people I agreed with were in power, then yeah, I would support a lot of anti free speech stuff. So I'm just willing to say that it's generally better to have freer speech, but it's not like an absolute inherent good. Same thing with kind of protesting or any of these things. Um, I would allow uh, certain types of protests, but not others. My issue is more when we like get into the trucker convoy type thing, where we're like, I support the right of people to protest, but not in this case. Like, just say they're your political opponents, um, and you want to shut them down because they disagree with you. Like, I'm okay with that. I get that. I just it's so fake and G slur when they do the whole, oh, I support free speech, but we have to ban people from every platform. But like, you just don't. So just be honest about it. Take a sip of my coffee. It's and this was kind of the whole thing with the Ukraine that really gets irritates me is all these people going, "Oh, war is always bad. Invading countries is always bad. Violating sovereignty is always bad." Except when we do it. Like, maybe it's they just don't want to talk about the concept of good or evil. Like, if you think Russia's evil, if you think they're your enemy, if you think that like it's unjustified, just say that, but don't give me this whole, oh, war, what is it good for, violence is bad. And we might look at this clip from the US ambassador because I think this just really sums up all my issues with it. Like, if you're the US, you can't claim that. And I'm not saying this like as someone who's going down the Noam Chomsky thing, even that I'm not necessarily even anti-American in general, but it's just really, really like contrived. I mean, you guys just got out of a 20-year long war. If you're going to go and invade another sovereign country and occupy it for 20 years and install a corrupt puppet regime, then you don't really have the standpoint to take this position that it's always bad. So that's kind of my issue with it. My issue is also, I've seen this with a couple people. Some of the people who say like good times make for weak men. I want a warrior aristocracy, and then a war actually breaks out, and they're like, "Oh well, we can't. It's bad. It's always bad." So I don't know. So that's just kind of my issue. I don't even know if by saying that I'm necessarily taking one side or another. I just find it really lame. It's like the people who are complaining about how there's the unpopular anti-war protests in Russia, and it's we have to support them, and they're like the same people who are um, the same people who are like were like, oh, it was awesome when they shut down the trucker convoy protests. So it's like, just don't say you don't support protests in all cases. Don't give me this nonsense. So let's just get into this, because I think this summarizes a lot of things. I mean, just look at the U.S. ambassador, and you can just hear like the way she talks. Let me know if the audio balance is okay. This is going to be cringe. I'm just going to let you know.
And thank you, Secretary General. Thank you for your strong stance and your powerful remarks today at the General Assembly, and for your remarks tonight. Colleagues, a few moments ago, I spoke to President Biden, who asked me to convey in the strongest possible terms his and our steadfast support for Ukraine and support for the urgent meeting this Council has convened tonight. Furthermore, he asked me to share that the United States and our allies and partners will continue to respond to Russia's...
Just poorly reading off a teleprompter. I mean, this is who they have to represent the U.S. at the UN Security Council. I mean, I think it speaks for itself.
...actions with unity, with clarity, and with conviction. We are here tonight because we believe, along with Ukraine, that a full-scale further invasion into Ukraine by Russia is imminent. Tonight, we're seeing the Russians close airspace, move troops into Donbass.
Oh, maybe this is the wrong one. Okay, sorry, this must be the wrong audio
to the representative
clip.
of the United States.
Let me see here. It should be from yesterday. Sorry, that was my bad. I was just doing the I fired up the wrong audio. Let's see, where is it? Okay. Okay, so that's from 2 days ago. That's from the crisis on Ukraine. Just because I was watching Russia Today yesterday, and they had it, and it was like the cringiest thing I've ever seen. So I'm just trying to find it. Let's see here. The speech that was made. Okay, let me see here. Maybe this is it. I'm sorry, guys. I should have done more show prep, but like I said, I was playing Elden Ring, and between World War III and like the complete destruction of the world, Elden Ring comes first. Okay, so let's see here.
Russia chose to invade its neighbor.
Okay, here we go.
Security Council, for the vote.
We are here today because of Russia's unprovoked, unjustified, unconscionable war on Ukraine.
Oh no, it's
Let us never forget that this is a war of choice, Russia's choice. Russia chose to invade its neighbor. Russia chose to inflict untold suffering on the Ukrainian people and on its own citizens.
What about when you chose to arm ISIS? I mean, that happened like a decade ago. What about when you chose to like invade Libya and cause a civil war that's still going on? What about when you invaded Iraq? Like, the U.S. has no basis for saying this.
Russia chose to violate Ukraine's sovereignty, to violate international law, to violate the UN Charter. Now, all across Ukraine, people are fleeing for their lives. Residents of Kyiv and Kharkiv have left their homes with only the belongings they could stuff in their backpacks to make shelter in subway stations, which have now become bomb shelters. We've seen reports of attacks on kindergartens and orphanages.
What's an orphanage? I don't know. Maybe that's how, like, the elite pronounce it. And, like, once again, didn't all this shit... I forget, is the U.S. blowing stuff up in Yemen at the moment? I mean, you guys were blowing stuff up in Afghanistan up until, like, a year ago. So, or, like, last year. So, it's such crocodile tears, and it's so fake. Just say Russia doesn't worship gays and black people, and that's why we hate them. Like, just say it. Don't give me this bullshit.
Babies, newborn babies in an intensive care unit have been evacuated into makeshift bomb shelters too.
Evacuated. They weren't even killed. They were evacuated.
We have seen heart-wrenching images of fathers sobbing as they say goodbye to their young children and sending their families away, as they send their families away to safety while they stay behind to defend their country. In Kyiv today, thousands of people.
When did they name Kiev to Kyiv? I don't know when that happened. I was kind of surprised, like, that they... I don't know. I guess they renamed Kyiv and Kharkov, or they just updated the English pronunciation. Because I'm just used to saying Kiev and Kharkov. Maybe I'm just like a boomer at 30 or something, but I don't know.
Crushed into a local train station with mothers passing their children over the crowd, begging for people to help, to get...
Also, what's the odds that this woman supports abortion? Like 100%? I mean, she probably supports post-birth abortion too.
Get their babies onto trains and to safety. According to the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, more than 50,000 people have fled Ukraine in less than 48 hours.
Whoa.
We've also seen everyday Russians bravely speak out and demonstrate in cities across Russia against President Putin's decision to plunge them into a war with their neighbor.
Remember when the Americans tried to do that on January 6th, and it was called 9/11 times 1,000, and they all got arrested, and all this other stuff happened. Remember that? Remember the trucker convoy? Okay.
They do not want to sacrifice Russian lives for Putin's ambition. This body, charged with maintaining international peace and security, was created to prevent exactly this kind of aggression from ever happening again.
Okay, so the purpose of the UN is to prevent international warfare from ever happening again. I mean, there's been no international warfare at all since the end of World War II. Definitely nothing that's been done by the U.S. And once again, I'm not even saying that, like, I'm against war. Like, I thought it was based when they bombed ISIS. I thought that was cool. I supported us killing every last member of ISIS. I don't like the fakeness of this. And I don't like the crocodile tears. I don't like all this other stuff.
Russia's latest attack on our most fundamental principles is so bold, so brazen, that it threatens our international system as we know it.
I mean, it threatens the international system because, like, Is that even, I guess I know I'm being flippant for saying Russia doesn't worship gays and black people, but I mean, is that even flippant? I know I'll probably get in trouble on YouTube for saying that. That is kind of how, like, a lot of Western countries are these days.
We have a solemn obligation to not look away. We believe.
Also, I'm going to be honest, that's the reason that a lot of right wing people in the West support it. Just because the standard is so low, given the countries that they live in, they just feel like supporting Russia, partially because the people who support Ukraine are like this.
Believe to our core that the noble intentions of this institution should still have a place in solving 21st century problems and shielding our children and our grandchildren from the horrors of war. The horrors of war are exactly what our Ukrainian brothers and sisters are experiencing today.
I don't think they're your brothers and sisters, lady.
The people of Ukraine will soon need food and water and shelter and medical aid.
But, like, am I even wrong that the reason that these people hate Russia, it's partially just boomer thing for the Cold War, but it's also just that Russia hasn't bought into, like, their pause. And, like, don't get me wrong, Russia has a lot of problems. I'm sure a lot of what Putin says and does is just there for, like, to try to get up support or to kind of appeal to people like me or to right-wing people in the West to try to spread disinformation and try to do stuff like that. I'm fully aware that Russia isn't this Christian paradise and there's a lot of problems with it. But at the same time, it's like, it's hard.
They will face displacement and lose everything they've worked to build. For these reasons, we and Albania, in consultation with our allies and partners, have proposed this draft resolution holding Russia to account for its aggression against Ukraine. This resolution condemns Russia's aggression. It reaffirms the sovereignty, independence, unity, and territorial integrity of Ukraine. And it demands the Russian.
Also, this whole, like, territorial integrity thing is also super, I'm just going to use the word, is super gay. Like, what about the territorial integrity of the Soviet Union? I mean, you could argue that the Ukraine seceding, well, okay, so America has the opinion that parts of the country aren't allowed to secede even if the people want them to. I mean, the Civil War resolved that. So if we're going to talk about territorial integrity and the idea that states can't secede, then the Ukraine violated the territorial integrity of Russia. So I like
Russian Federation to immediately, completely, and unconditionally withdraw its forces. It also calls for the facilitation of rapid, safe, and unhindered humanitarian assistance to those in need in Ukraine and the protection of civilians, including those who are humanitarian personnel.
What about the protection of civilians in cities where there's riots and the police and army don't do anything and they destroy their property?
Today, we are taking a principled stand against Russia's aggression in this council, but many of us are taking actions in our capitals to defend international law, including the UN Charter, and to impose severe consequences on Russia for its invasion of Ukraine. In coordination with our allies and partners, we are imposing severe and immediate economic costs on Russia. These measures include sweeping financial sanctions that will have an immediate impact on its economy and export controls that will cut off Russia's access to vital technological inputs, atrophy its industrial base, and undercut Russia's strategic ambitions to exert influence on the world stage.
In other words, we're going to cut off the exportation of raw materials and gasoline and everything else from Russia to Europe. It's going to skyrocket the price of basically everything. It's going to cause widespread discontent, recessions, and mass inflation. I mean, let's pretend that Russia is able to take large portions of the Ukraine or install a puppet government, and they're able to prevent the exportation of Ukrainian wheat to Europe. I mean, that's going to make the whole food crisis even worse. So it's.
In addition, it was just announced, President Biden will be sanctioning President Putin himself, along with Foreign Minister Lavrov and members of Russia's national security team. These actions are meant to complement the important work we're doing in the Security Council and the resolution we have put forward today. History will judge us for our actions or lack thereof. And so long as we have a Security Council, I believe we ought to strive to ensure it lives up to the highest purposes to prevent conflict and avert unnecessary war. Russia has already subverted that mission, but at a minimum, at the very minimum, the rest of us have an obligation to object and to stand up for the UN Charter. To those who say all parties are culpable.
Oh yeah, I forgot. How many resolutions has the? Okay, you know what? I wasn't even. It kind of blocked my mind. So, like, Israel condemned the Russian invasion of the Ukraine on the grounds that, like, it violated sovereignty and you can't occupy territory belonging to another country. I mean, how many resolutions has the U.S. vetoed over the years relating to Israel? Isn't there, like, thousands of them? I know there's hundreds of times when people were complaining that, like, that they did, yeah, because the resolutions are like, hey, Israel, you're occupying another country, and they're like, you're violating the territorial integrity of the Palestinian people. And it's like, well, we're gonna veto it. It's just like, just come out and say you hate Russia.
Culpable?
Just say it.
I say that is a clear cop-out. One country, that is a clear, and to stand up for the UN Charter. To those who say all parties are culpable, I say that is a clear cop-out. One country is invading another. Russia is the aggressor here.
Oh, okay. So Constantine Martelli, thank you for the super chat. Standing with my trans Jewish Roma sisters in Ukraine at this critical time.
For the UN.
Let's just listen to this line again, because this line is amazing.
Charter. To those who say all parties are culpable, I say that is a clear cop-out. One country is invading another. Russia is the aggressor here. There is no middle ground. Any doubters? I say look at the kindergarten that was bombed.
Okay, so people in the chat, you can tell me if I'm being unfair here. So she said, in the case where a country invades another country, there's never a provocation. It's always the country that invades the other country is unjustified. You can't say the country that got invaded was doing any kind of provocation. I don't. Maybe I'm like extrapolating that, but the position seems to be here from this entire speech that anytime one country invades another country, it's always the case where the invader is guilty of it. Is guilty, and provocation, like, just can't, like, it doesn't mitigate it at all. So, I mean, let's see here. Now, I get that this woman's retarded. I'm just saying that I'm using this because this is a good way to go through all the various points about the situation. Because kind of in one place to kind of encapsulate a whole bunch of different stuff at once. So if we're going to talk about the issue of provocation, in the last couple decades, there have been coups in Moldova, Serbia, I think Kyrgyzstan. The Ukraine was a more recent one. Armenia, Georgia. There have been coups in all these different countries. There's also been attempted coups in Belarus, Kazakhstan. Maybe someone can post if I'm missing a country or so. But basically, every country surrounding Russia has either had regime change or is in the process of them attempting to impose regime change on it. So the end result is going to be that pretty much everybody on Earth, like, that Russia's just supposed to accept everybody surrounding them. And let's not even get into the whole... Let's put morality aside for a minute. Let's not talk about whether Russia's right or wrong or the U.S. is right or wrong. If we're just going to talk about very basic foreign policy or foreign affairs, are you totally ignoring the puppet governments Russia set up in these countries? I mean, you can argue they set up puppet governments in these countries. I'm just saying that they're presenting the context that none of that stuff happened. I have not heard a single person in Western media, and I could be wrong. I'm not going to ban Froggy for having a counter opinion. That's, if he starts like trolling or something, I will, but I'm not going to try to do that. But I'm just saying, from the Russian perspective, these countries were pro-Russia and they got overthrown by the West, and they've been surrounded and they're feeling extremely threatened and backed to a corner. Now, once again, you can agree with that or disagree with that. I'm just saying I think that's the perspective they're going from. And if the U.S., well, we know because the U.S. has been in the same position. When there was an unfavorable government in Mexico, they invaded Mexico. When there was a number of unfavorable governments in the Caribbean or Central America, they invaded them or backed military juntas or stuff like that. And once again, I'm not even necessarily against a lot of those, because I think killing commies was based, but it's just the pretense that there was no provocation whatsoever on the part of the West in this situation. So there's different ways of looking at international relations. This is something I studied a lot back when I was in university. This is something I studied a lot back in university. So there's different ways of looking at international world. So kind of what was traditionally the most common was the realist perspective, which is the idea largely that morality has no place in politics. In international affairs, that it's a zero-sum game where states act in their rational self-interest, and that there's inherently a certain amount of paranoia. There's a black box where you don't really know what the other states are doing, and so you have to assume that everybody's acting their own self-interest. Now, a counter to that was invented in the 19th and early 20th century in international liberalism, which was the idea that by imposing treaties and these global organizations and stuff like that, we could move towards a more moral world that's more of a rule of right than by might necessarily. Which I'm somewhat sympathetic to in a certain degree. Like, I think an example of that would be the EU because I think a lot of people in Europe got tired of Germany and France fighting wars every like 30 years or so. And so the idea was we're going to build this system to restrain it because we're just tired of it happening. So, from a realist perspective, you could say, look, Russia's being surrounded. Their things are getting darker and worse from them. This is basically their rational attempt is to throw a dice. We're going to throw the dice. We're going to maybe be able to reverse some of these trends. We're maybe going to be able to better defend ourselves and better protect ourselves. So, like, once again, you can agree or disagree. I'm just saying from Russia's perspective, if we're looking at this from a realist standpoint.
This morning, take a hard look. To those who say there is a special history between Russia and Ukraine that somehow excuses the war, I say we should all think carefully who that label
Carefully
might apply to next. And as I said on Monday night, President Putin asserted that Russia has a rightful claim to all territories from the Russian Empire. And just a few hours ago, Russia threatened Finland and Sweden with military and political repercussions. Responsible member states do not invade their neighbors. They do not commit violence against their neighbors just because they have the ability to do so. That is the entire purpose of our international system. That is fundamentally the point of the Security Council and the United Nations. So, colleagues, this is a simple vote today. Let me put it plainly. Vote yes if you believe in upholding the UN Charter.
I don't.
Vote yes if you support Ukraine's or any state's right to sovereignty and territorial integrity. Vote yes if you believe Russia should be held to account for its actions. Vote no or abstain if you do not uphold the Charter and align yourselves with the aggressive and unprovoked actions of Russia.
It's unprovoked, guys. There is no
Just as
provocation.
Russia had a choice, so do you. Thank you.
Just as America had a choice in Iraq, so do you. So, okay, so let's take a look here. So, what is the current military situation on the ground in Ukraine? I don't know if I've necessarily even said, like, you might think I'm just supporting, like, Russia completely. I just want, like, people to be honest. I guess it's just kind of my take at this at the moment. I just kind of want people to be honest about it. So, at the moment, we are at about 10,000 killed, which frankly is less than I'd expect given how big this whole revolution has been. How big this invasion has been. So, from my understanding of what the current military situation is, the Ukraine is doing pretty decently well in the northeast, and to a certain extent in parts of the east. I don't know if there was defections or they didn't expect there to be a major offensive from Crimea or what, but it feels like just in the south, they're just kind of blowing through. Like crazy. And I don't know how long the Battle of Kiev is going to last, to be honest. I'm trying to think about so I really have no idea what Russia wants. I'm actually kind of shocked that they completely invaded the Ukraine to such a level. I honestly thought if there was going to be a military action, it was just going to be them invading the Donbass region and maybe kicking the Ukraine out of all the claimed territory, or reopening the water pipelines in Crimea or something like that. I was really not expecting um, this level of stuff to happen. Um, to be honest. So that stuff is happening. Um, so this kind of reminds me a bit of the 6 Day War. So during the 6 Day War, Israel succeeded in launching a preemptive attack, which, to be fair, I think Israel was correct in doing that because the various Arab countries were saying they were going to attack and they got their soldiers into position and stuff. So I think Israel was probably at least logically right to do that. So Israel blew up most of the logistical capacity, um, destroyed most of their air force on the ground, and just launched their blitz. So Israel's basic war goal was to grab as much territory as possible before the great powers inevitably forced them to stop. So even towards the end of the 6 Day War, they were trying to pull like maneuvers at the UN and stuff like that to try to give them a couple more hours to grab more territory so they would be in a better negotiating position. So I wonder if maybe that's what Russia's doing here is they're going to just grab as much territory as they can um, before the clock runs out. Maybe they've only planned to do this for a week or so, and the more they can grab in that amount of time, the better the negotiation position will be. I'm really just not sure at the moment what the ultimate war goal is. Because I was not expecting something of this level. The other issue is if you go to such a Israel versus Arab states is different. I think in oh, okay, in the Israeli Arab wars, Arabs often had better weapons. Um, to be honest, it was not as if like they had stuff from about the same level of stuff. Let's see here. I'm just seeing. 2020 Russian invasion of Ukraine. Okay. No, I think this is the most recent map. I don't think it moved that much from the other one that I was looking at. So let's see here. The other issue with imposing massive sanctions on Russia at the beginning and doing everything you could at the moment um, sorry, I need to stop looking at chat when I'm doing these because I just get distracted reading the comments. Um, is by basically playing all their cards but the military option at the beginning, they don't really have anything more to threaten Russia with. So it's like we're just going to ban Russia and kick Russia off of everything. I mean, once you do that, what's left? What's going to be the next step or something like that? Uh, I don't really know. So they've done everything. So what's the point in Russia not going all the way then? I don't really know what they have to threaten Russia with. I'm kind of worried. So the thing about people with dementia, from my understanding, is they aren't. I don't think Biden's a puppet. I think he's hyper aggressive and mentally unstable, and I'm scared he's going to do something stupid. Um, I'm worried he's going to do a massive cyber attack. They've talked about cutting off the internet, maybe doing a no-fly zone and shooting down Russian planes over the Ukraine. All kinds of just stuff like that. I could see happening that could escalate this situation. I do think that the U.S. wanted this war. And I don't even think that was from an anti-Russian standpoint. It's Biden is just getting completely and totally destroyed in the polls. So let's look at Real Clear Politics. The Democrats are heading for a complete and total disaster in the fall. And generally speaking, public approval ratings go way, way up during a crisis or a conflict. We'll look at Bush's in a minute, but I think Bush's went way, way, way up post 9/11. They might have actually been the whole that. So the Republicans are actually up in the generic ballot, which I don't think has happened in like 8 years or something like that. So it's quite possible they might retake the House. I don't know about the Senate because the current results really uh, favor the Democrats just in terms of what states are up. But the Republicans will also probably pick up a bunch of states, governorships, stuff like that. So I think part of this is Biden just trying to distract from the situation. And if it's not Biden, it's the people who are around Biden. I don't know. Maybe that's just a conspiracy theory. I don't really think so. Let's take a peek. Approval rating George Bush. Let me see where the approval rating is. Yeah, Bush's approval rating went up to 92% after 9/11. And was at about 80-90% after the attacks. So, I mean, his approval rating, like when the Iraq War started, like let's look at this. It went up to 70%. He did get a large boost from it. Like, let's look at what Biden's approval rating is at the moment. From my understanding, it's horrendous. Okay, so Biden has an approval rating of around 40%. Bush's went up over 70% when he invaded Iraq. So I think it's possible, but that this crisis is to a certain extent something like that. So people can agree with that or disagree with that. That's just kind of my thinking that part of what caused this was a desire on behalf of the Democrats to distract from the domestic problems. I think pretty much every leader does that. It's pretty common throughout history where if domestic stuff is not going well, to go through it. I don't know what Biden could have done to start this. I think they kind of stonewalled attempts to end this with some sort of negotiated peace. There was the recent attempt at a color revolution in Kazakhstan. There's an attempt in Belarus and stuff like that. There was the colored revolution in Armenia. So I don't know if Biden's behind that directly or not. But I think in the West they have been ramping up and really just been going like and been trying to escalate this as much as they possibly can on that standpoint. So there was also the issue of them just trying to expand into. Someone's pointing out the whole NATO expanding into the post-Soviet countries. I think there was an agreement that they weren't going to do that. Now, you could argue that Russia also violated its side of the agreement when it said it wasn't going to invade Ukraine after it gave up its nukes. But then you could argue Euromaidan was a coup and that ended the support for the treaty on the other side. So I don't really know. That's just kind of my take on the whole thing. Where, and I don't know, maybe this sounded overly pro-Russia. I don't think I even really talked that much about whether I think the invasion's morally justified or not. But I was just trying to make the point that the whole situation, I think, is a lot more complex than what the Western media is trying to put it out to be. I think there's just a gross imbalance in the coverage. I will say this though, if anyone thinks the Russian government doesn't spread disinformation, you're high. I was watching some RT just for like the lulz. RT is like stand up propaganda. It's like Iraqi information tier level of propaganda. Like they take the whole denazification thing completely seriously. Um it's like, yeah, we're going to remove the Nazis who are controlling the Ukraine, and it's just the whole denazification thing. I think it's a troll. Maybe it's weird to talk about like a world leader trolling the rest of the world, but it is just funny to just use the term with basically no context. Once again, I hate to be like a big brain centrist on this, but try watching Russia Today or any of the Kremlin disinformation. They're like, there's no military invasion. It's just a police action like Vietnam was. Nothing's going on, guys. They're not doing any of that sort of stuff. And that's kind of the issue when you're trying to figure out what the hell's even going on the ground. Because you have some of the worst media bias that we've ever seen um, on the Western side, and then we have Russian propaganda on the other. I've been watching some India Today and been trying to watch some sources from kind of third parties because I figured they might have a better idea what's going on. I mean, obviously, I have my own bias, but I don't need something to completely fabricate information. Like, there's all this stuff on RT where they're like, oh, the Ukraine has been hiding artillery in neighborhoods. They're committing war crimes. Oh, like a shell hit a kindergarten. Like, it's also just really gay on their side as well. Uh, what they've been kind of saying. I mean, it just kind of is what it is. War is just brutal. There's always going to be people who died. You can do your best to kind of minimize it. It's as they say in Fallout, war never changes. Putin makes the best Russian hackers. I don't think I talked about Russian bots or anything like that, or said that like the people who are pro Russia aren't actually like real. I'm just saying if you do look at Russian state media, it is stand up propaganda. The issue is that, and this was kind of an issue that we saw during the whole election. Like, so in the aftermath of the election, when we were having the whole fraud conversation, you had the media who basically said electoral fraud has never happened in the history of America. You're mentally ill about it. I mean, as I said in my video, what they said was not only are you insane if you think there was any electoral fraud, but if you think there was any logistical issue whatsoever caused by COVID, you're mentally ill for thinking about that. Every other aspect of the economy and the supply chain was affected except for the election. And then you had the alternative media, which did an even worse job. Does anyone remember all the stuff about how there's going to be a coup? There's going to be remember that thing like that there was the special ops team in Germany that seized the servers with the voting data on them. Everyone was like, oh, it's gonna happen, guys. They're gonna uh, object to the election and get it overturned. It's like people were saying like, oh, the Supreme Court case is gonna work, guys. It's 100%. I think it was like Real American Politics was like, it's like 80% chance, guys, that the election's gonna get overturned. And at the time, I didn't take the perspective that some people took, like Ramsey Paul, that oh, people shouldn't try to do anything about it. People shouldn't fight it. People shouldn't uh, try to contest the election results. But I also didn't think it was like a good idea to bet your entire credibility on saying something like is going to happen confirmed, and then it doesn't happen at all, and then you just kind of go into cope mode and like, well, just because I claimed all this stuff and it doesn't mean that I've lost any kind of legitimacy. It's kind of like all those countries that uh all those people on YouTube who do leaks, like 100% Snoke is Darth Plagueis confirmed. It's 100% confirmed. It's like it's definitely going to happen, guys. There's no question. There's no disagreement on it whatsoever. Um, Ray is a Kenobi, 100% confirmed. That kind of thing. So, Coffee says these same people think they're going to win in the next round of votes in 2024, even after saying the whole system is crap. Okay, so it's a little more complicated now because the GOP in a lot of the swing states passed really harsh voter restrictions, or rather, dramatically beefed up the electoral process. Also, it'll probably be harder without COVID happening, but yeah, I know what you mean. Um, I'm just saying to be fair. That's the counter argument. It's not a completely irrational counter argument. Zelensky has secretly, fled the Ukraine. I mean, so yeah, somebody brings up Q. So trust the plan. The Earth is flat. Ukrainian patriots are in control. Um, I mean, that's what's happening. Patriots are in control of the situation. Moscow's about to fall. The Polish Lithuanian Commonwealth will be restored under Ukrainian leadership. Maybe like Russia will just become like the greater Ukraine or something like that. Um, I don't know. Does the Ukraine have any irredentist claims on anywhere? Like, does it on Moldova or something? I'll say this. I do love this part of the Ukraine. I call this the troll part of the Ukraine. It's just there to prevent Moldova from uh, accessing the ocean. I always love troll parts of countries that like are just there basically to block another country from accessing the sea. But yeah, we're gonna have to see what happens. So, does anyone have any other country comments that they want my take on? I think I covered just about everything I wanted to say about the conflict. I think the Zelensky government is basically doomed. Also, I'm gonna say this: we can talk about democracy in all these countries. It's just bullshit. Um, all these countries are super corrupt. All these, if we're gonna say democracy is a good thing, I don't think any of these elections are free. It's more or less just whoever is cheating more. Like if we look at Russia, are Russian elections fraudulent? Yeah, I do think they definitely are, but I still think United Russia would win. I still think that Russia does have, Putin does have the overwhelming support of the Russian people. But that's just kind of how these countries work. So when we get into coup and counter coup and democracy and not democracy, I think it's pretty hard because the whole thing is just a disaster and it's just kind of a mess. And I think a lot of these people just don't really, by temperament or design or whatever, don't really care about living in a democratic society. They just kind of want that thing. So, anyways, hopefully you guys enjoyed the stream. I'll go through and cut out the part where I just kind of completely fucked the whole part of the stream up. So God bless. I'll talk to you guys soon.